And you do something kind for them and they go to their dealer, as it were, and thank them for helping them out. How would you feel? It's like, don't you realize I'm the one trying to help you out? Like, this is what the children of Israel were described at many, many, many times. But notice how Solomon describes the crafty harlot here in chapter 7. First he says here, my son, I'm starting from verse 1. My son, keep my words, treasure my commandments within you. Keep my commands and live, and my law as the apple of your eye. Bind them on your fingers, write them on the tablets of your heart. Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call understanding your nearest kin, that they may keep you from the immoral woman, from the seductress who flatters with her words. Essentially, what kind of picture is Solomon describing here of someone who is an immoral woman? The words deceive you. Oh, yes. I mean, he goes into quite a lot of description here. Let's continue reading. For at the window of the house, I looked through my lattice. I saw among the simple. I perceived among the youths the young man devoid of understanding, like they're not thinking, passing along the street near her corner. And he took the path to her house in the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark of night. And a woman met him there with the attire of a harlot and a crafty heart. Notice the deception. The intent of the woman is not that she cares for you. This is going to become significant when we go back to chapter 17. What is the harlot or the immoral woman most interested in? There's something in it for me. That's what I want. Now, in order to get that thing which she wants, oh, you're so handsome. You're so brave. You're so, wow, we would be great together. Fill in the blank of whatever it is, right? Does she really mean what she says? Or is it, as he is saying, she's flattering you. She doesn't actually mean what she's saying, but she's saying it so that she can get into your pocketbook, right? Lurking around every corner. Let's read from verse 21. With her enticing speech, she causes him to yield. With her flattering lips, she seduces him. Immediately he went after her as an ox goes to the slaughter. Not a pretty picture. Yeah, have you ever tried to get like an animal to do something? Usually, how do you do it? You got to give them something that they want, right? For an ox, maybe it's a carrot or something like that. If you have a dog or a cat, you might give them some treats, come over here. And what happens? The tail starts wagging, they just go right there. But notice the imagery here. It's an ox going to the slaughter. This isn't like a happy memory that's going to be made. This is your life is going to end. And yet, she puts something alluring in front of you. Notice, or as a fool to the correction of stocks, till an arrow struck his liver. As a bird hastens to the snare, he did not know it would cost his life. Now, therefore, listen to me, my children. Pay attention to the words of my mouth. Do not let your heart turn aside to her ways, and do not stray into her paths. For she has cast down many wounded, and all who were slain by her were strong men. Not weak men, strong men. Her house is the way to hell, or to the grave, essentially. Is the Hebrew word there, descending to the chambers of death. Not a really pretty picture of what this profession is. But do you get that sense of someone who's trying to deceive, someone who's trying to trick you, to get you to do something because ultimately they're interested in some other part of you, right? Either the money or maybe a favor or maybe a whatever it might be. Don't think that isn't here in this chapter as well. When we're talking about the kings which are committing fornication with her, which have relations with her, this is not they found love and they lived happily ever after story. As you will see, the more that we read this story, the kings actually and the warders and the beast that she sits on actually turn on the woman and end up destroying her as well. I should say God ultimately destroys her, but he uses some of the people to do this as well. So back to Revelation chapter 17. And we're talking about the wine that, by the way, what time do I have to finish? 8 o'clock. Okay, good. I want to be mindful of that. Well, we've made it to verse 3. We can do it. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting. Notice now he's shifted from the hearing. What has he heard? He's heard of the great harlot, drunk with the wine. She's sitting on many waters, right? The kings are committing fornication with her. Now he's going to see the things which directly relate to the things which he has heard. So now he turns and he sees. And what does he see? He sees a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay. How should we understand this? Sitting on a scarlet beast. Why do you think the beast is scarlet? Okay, represents the devil. Does the devil really mean red, or is that just like contemporary literature?
Normally, it is said that Satan was cast from heaven, the serpent, the devil,
Dragon, that's right. I mean, there's no question that it seems to lend itself to that. I think that is true. Notice what it says in verse 6. I saw the woman drunk with the blood of what? Saints. Okay, so what color is blood typically? Someone who has had, maybe too much to drink of something. If you try like blue Gatorade and you accidentally take a cup this big and you try to take it, you're going to be blue eventually because there's only so much you can take. You have this imagery of someone who is drunk, overly drunk, so much that it's spilling all around her, and this beast is scarlet in the way that it appears. Like, not just, again, a little bit of wrongdoing. This is a lot of wrongdoing. Think of Isaiah chapter 1, verse 18 as well. What does God say there? Very famous text. Come, let us reason together. Though your sins be as scarlet, I can make you clean, right? I can wash you. Though they are like crimson, I can make you as white as wool, right? So this notion of sin also being associated with red and being scarlet, I mean, the connections are certainly there. We'll find that that's not the only color that is used to portray this woman, but let's keep reading. So he sees the woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. How should we understand the term beast? Say it louder, you're correct. Kingdom, right? Why do you say it's kingdom? I agree with you. Beasts represent kingdom, but where do you get that from? Daniel, right? Daniel, typically in Daniel chapter 7, we go there and we have there the lion with 2 wings, the bear with 3 ribs, the leopard that has 4 heads and 4 wings, and then this dreadful, terrible beast with iron teeth and iron claws and so on. And it's specifically told when the angel comes in chapter 7 and declares to Daniel what the interpretation is. The first beast is the kingdom of Babylon. The second beast is the kingdom of. The third is the kingdom of, the kingdom of, the kingdom of. And so it shouldn't be a surprise here that when we look at a beast, we are thinking kingdom. We are thinking political power, right? And so we have that here. So the woman, what does a woman represent? Church. So a woman that's a harlot is representing, as we mentioned in the beginning, a false church. Was Israel immune to being called a false church? Think about that. Is it possible that even today God has true believers who are part of the true church, and he might have, should I say, non-genuine believers who might think they're part of the true church but aren't? Don't think that it's not possible for anyone to somehow escape having Babylon-like attributes anywhere. Because if you are part of Israel, remember, even Paul has to say, not all Israel is Israel. Right? It's not where you are. It's not where you're. They struggled in the New Testament times and even in Old Testament times. We are Abraham's seed. Sometimes, let me translate that for you. I'm an Adventist. I'm a 3rd, 4th, 5th. My great-great-grandfather was on Ellen White's knee. Whatever it is. As though that is going to gain you entrance to heaven because of, you see what I mean? Why do you think the Bible and Jesus is over and over again emphasizing personal relationship with Jesus? personal relationship with Jesus? Is Jesus just saying, you know what, you should pray every day and read the Bible every day because I just want you to? Or is it more like, you really need this, right? It's not just I want you to, but this is for your benefit that you enter into the relationship with me. I need you to be connected to the true vine because if you are, you will bear good fruit. You need to bear good fruit. It's for your sake. You will have more joy, more happiness, more of everything that I want to give you if you're connected with me. And if you're not, then you're falling for the lie that you can actually receive that kind of fulfillment and happiness outside of God, which is not what the Bible presents ever as being the right way. Notice again, there is this notion of the woman who is represented again as a false kind of church. I want to make one more link here as well. I'm not sure if you noticed this in chapter 12 of Revelation. I'm not going to go through the entire chapter except just briefly summarizing some things because you've probably already gone over it. But Revelation 12 sort of gives us a little bit of the timeline of how things happen. So there's a great sign that appears in heaven. There's a woman clothed with light, right? We typically represent or refer to this as a pure, as a holy church, right? The people of God, the remnant you can call throughout the history, those who have always been faithful, leading eventually to a child who was going to be born that's going to rule the nations, right? Who would that be representing? Jesus, right? So far you're following the story. Now there's dragon who wants to capture this child. Does he succeed in getting the child? No, because the child gets caught up to heaven. Again, a strong allusion to the fact that this is Jesus. Because just when Satan thought he had him on the cross, what happens like 40 days later? Gone. Resurrection, you have, a couple days later, 40 days later, the ascension. And then you have these verses from 7 through 12 where there's a war that wages in heaven. And I firmly believe that this is Jesus taking the place of Satan in heaven. Finally, there's a human being who is perfect, who has not sinned, who can represent us. This is the position which Adam held and which Satan usurped against the rule. Hopefully you talked a little bit about this, right? This is why in the book of Job, Satan comes to the council, and when God says, where are you coming from? He says, I'm coming from earth. This is my jurisdiction. So I think after the resurrection, after the cross and the resurrection, when Jesus ascended, Satan was kicked out of heaven, if you could argue, like even more. He already lost his position as covering cherub, and I think he was kicked out, but then he deceived Adam and Eve. So he had some limited, but nevertheless access, because he said, earth is part of the universe. So if this is a universe council, then I deserve to be there. At least until we had a representative of the human race who was perfect and who did not sin, like Jesus. And now we have an advocate, right, up there in the Father, someone pleading our cause, not an accuser constantly, like, oh, they're not good enough, they won't do this. Yes? Absolutely, yeah. And
so God was vindicated, so to speak.
Absolutely, yes. So notice what happens after the devil is cast out. His tail drew a third of the inhabitants of heaven. And notice the way that this is summarized in the book of Revelation. I love and hate it at the same time. Hopefully you'll catch it here when I read it, but it's in verse 12. Notice, therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Why do you think heaven is happy? Satan is gone. We don't have to hear him anymore. Like the accusations, he's gone. Rejoice. But notice the next sentence. This is the hate part. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea. That means us, unfortunately, right? For the devil has come to you having great wrath because he knows he has a short time. And notice this. Now when the dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman. Who's that woman? The pure woman, the church, who gave birth to the male child. But the woman was given 2 wings, etc. So the serpent spewed out water out of his mouth like a flood after the woman and caused her to be carried away by the flood. But the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth, swallowed up the flood which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. And the dragon was enraged with the woman. Notice how many times you see woman, 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 woman. Now notice the shift. He was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring. He's upset with the woman. Why doesn't it say, so he went to make war with the woman? Why is it just with her offspring? I'm going to give you one of the reasons why I think. Because in the flood, as much as the woman was helped, he got the woman. He deceived the woman. He changed the woman from the pure doctrine and from the pure church into a harlot, much like he succeeded with ancient Israel. They were pure. They were coming out of Egypt. God was liberating them. He was teaching them how to be good citizens. And what did they eventually do? They turned their back on God. They fell for the deceptions of idolatry, of everything else. And they didn't want God in their lives. And what we read about now is that there's a harlot. There's another woman. There's an impure church that has impure doctrines, right? But yet holds it up as though it is something good, even though it's not. Satan, in all of his rage and in pursuing the faithful people of God after, isn't that exactly what you see happening? First, the church spreads. It's a perfect woman. Satan is so enraged and he has 1,260 years. Eventually, the woman becomes his. It's his harlot, so to speak. But there's still a remnant. There's still some offspring that keep the commandments of Jesus in Revelation 12. And that's who he seeks to make war with. It makes sense, right? In terms of the cosmic picture here. Yes?
Doesn't it show two different groups, so to speak? Here's a woman who is pure that the Lord allowed to go into the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
And then here's the harlot who, at first she was pure, but now she's so polluted with idolatry and all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
She, kings of the earth.
Yes?
She grew,
Yeah?
but there is still that little group that the Lord spread
Exactly.
as the faithful woman.
Exactly. And that's what is at least in Revelation 12. I agree with you. It's still a woman. But that's what in Revelation 12 I feel is meant by the term offspring. It's like a remnant from the woman, much like a remnant from Israel, right, shall be saved, the ones who remain faithful. They're the ones that are Christ's bride, right? Still compared to as a woman, but still not called like woman in the grand sense of like all of his people, because many of them apostatized. So God calls them unfaithful. They have become the harlot in Revelation 17. Again, we're not talking about specific people here, right? We're talking about overarching themes, how the church was pure and faithful early on during the time of the apostles and as Christianity spread, but very soon after, by the time you get to the 200s, the 300s, the 400s, a lot more error starts coming in. By the time you get to the 500s, you more or less have the establishment of a system of political and religious power, which is never something Jesus tried to accomplish here on earth. Yes, the little horn, exactly. We're gonna get into that. We'll make it through verse 3. All right, so he carried me away on the Spirit. I saw a woman sitting on the scarlet beast, full of names of blasphemy. That doesn't sound really good, does it? Talk about that fermented wine, right? That false doctrine. This woman is claiming to be something that she actually isn't, which is really what deception is all about, right? Any kind of like, I'm going to swindle you out of some money. I might probably, if you invest with me, you will, make 10 times as much money. So you give me some money, and of course you don't make it. I take it and I leave. But that was part of the deception. I gave you something that you thought would be very good, but it wasn't. That's exactly how this woman works. She has names of blasphemy. She believes that she is something she is not. Blasphemy, biblically speaking, is when you're claiming more or less to be God. Jesus was the one who was almost stoned because they accused him of blasphemy, right? He claimed he could forgive sins. We know no one can forgive sins but God. Therefore, we should stone him. Of course, Jesus disappears. It was not his time yet, and he disappeared in the curse. She claims the prerogatives of God. And of course, the kings of the earth, they're quite happy with that. Let me do my business, and I will be absolved. All right, this beast has 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, this is, okay, we're going to have to move a little bit faster. But the 7 heads and 10 horns, what do you think that is representative of? Where have you heard about 10 horns before? Daniel, right? Daniel 7, that great and terrible beast has 10 horns. Eventually, one comes up, a little one at first, and it uproots 3 of them, right? So you end up having only 8 after that. I think if you take away 3, that's 7, and you have the little horn. So you have 8. But it rises in prominence. It only starts out as a little horn, but it doesn't stay a little horn, right? It gets very, very big. In fact, so big that it gets a mouth and a face on it and it starts speaking blasphemies. I mean, the connections here are undeniable in terms of the way that Jesus is, again, trying to repeat what he has revealed before, but in a slightly different way, giving different nuances and giving different information. So hopefully, as the believers keep studying and keep reading, they will be able to better identify who this is talking about. Now, that's the 10 horns, but the beast in Daniel 7 only had one head, right? Why do you think this beast might have 7 heads? Just put that in the back of your mind. Let's not answer that now because I don't want to get too ahead of the story. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet. Purple is the color, particularly in the New Testament, but even in the Old Testament, of royalty. And notice the way in which the woman is described. Not just purple and scarlet, but she's adorned with gold, with precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a wooden cup, golden cup, full of abomination and filthy. Like, from the outside, she looks very good, very wealthy. Kind of like someone you might want to do business with, except for the fact that she's a harlot, right? But what I'm trying to say is that she's a harlot from the perspective of the believers because she's got wrong doctrine. But if you are not a believer and you just look on the outside, what does she look like to you? She looks beautiful. If you fall for the trap, if you fall for the deception, a harlot can be very beautiful, right? But as Solomon tells us, she's leading you like an ox to the slaughter. You just don't know it yet. But that's where it's going. So keep that in your mind here, that she does not look, how should I say, deformed and kind of sickly and she's coughing. She looks like she's making, how many times do we judge things by the outside? Many, many times, right? The temptation is if someone looks successful, they must be doing something right. The disciples used to believe that as well. They thought all the rich Jews, well, they were going to heaven for sure. And all the sick Jews, well, did this man sin or his parents sin that he was born blind? How many times did Jesus have to correct them and say, that's not the way life is? You can't look on the outside. You have to look on the inside. All right. And on her forename was written the name, Mystery. Mystery, such a good word. Like, why do you think mystery is placed there? What does mystery mean? Unknown, right? Evil, yeah, but you can't fathom it. That's the thing. You can't explain it, right? There are several things that the Bible calls mystery, like the mystery of iniquity. Can you explain sin? I'm not saying define it, but I'm saying, can you say, sin exists because, can you finish the sentence? If you could make a reason for sin, then you would excuse it, right? So that's why the Bible continually calls sin like the mystery of iniquity. Like, God was a loving father. He was a good father. He did one thing after another for his people. Like, it was mysterious to him why they should ever turn his back on him. Did I not send you the rain? Did I not send you the blessings? Like, in fact, in Isaiah chapter 5, you want to read something, the parable of the vineyard, God is literally asking his people to judge, what more could I have done in my vineyard that I have not done in it? I did everything I could, and even more so. How patient was God with the antediluvians? Things are bad, I need to destroy them. But wait, I'm going to give them 120 years longer. And who listened? No one than those who would have listened 120 years earlier. Amazing, like mysterious. Like, God tells you what's going to happen. He's warning you of it, and he makes a way of escape possible, and you don't listen. How do you explain that? Like, there's no like Eve ate of the tree because like she was warned, don't eat of the tree. There's an enemy out there. All he wants you to do is to make you eat of that tree, and all you have to do to withstand the test is just don't eat from that tree. Seems so simple to us, right? All of us, if only we could go back, right? We would have taken an axe to that tree, or maybe a chainsaw, right? Anyway, let's keep going. So, mystery, inexplicable, Babylon the Great. Now, the connotations of Babylon, there's probably another good 5-10 minutes we could talk about the history of Babylon, right? Not only in Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, going all the way to the Tower of Babel, right? Where the languages were confused. And we even say that like a baby babbles, right? Like, blah, 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 like they're trying to figure out how to say words, what kind of sounds they can make. It's important for the learning process. But typically when you hear a language that you don't understand, kind of sounds a bit like babbling, right? Part of the reason why the Romans called many of the Germanic tribes at that time barbarians was because when they heard them speak, all they heard was ba, 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 barbarian. I'm just saying, it's Babylon the Great. Lots of confusion. I don't understand what's going on. Notice, the mother of harlots. She's indicated here as a mother. Oh, I meant no offense to any Germans, by the way, if anyone speaks German here. I have roots in Germany, but I'm just saying, any language that you hear that is unfamiliar to you, it sounds strange at first, right? Until you learn it, until you get used to the inflections, the sounds, until you learn a bit of vocabulary, then all of a sudden it starts making more and more sense. But here you have Babylon the Great, full of confusion, and she's the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. Global. She has daughters, right? If she's described as a mother, she must have children. Children who are likewise also identified as harlots. If she's the mother of harlots, then they also are harlots. And this is typically where we get the picture of a sort of like a system and then mini systems after that, but they're all partaking in the same false doctrine, right? In the same false teachings. And I saw the woman, and how is she described? Drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs and of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement. Why do you think he marveled with great amazement? I would suggest at least one reason. There might have been several. I mean, it's kind of a horrible picture that you see for one. Sometimes when it's Halloween and I'm driving along the road, sometimes I marvel in amazement at some of the things I see. You know, I'm just like, really? Like you had to go that? Anyway. Like, so what I'm saying is sometimes when you're in the presence of something horrific, you might be amazed, but not in a like, wow, that's amazing, but in a like, what are you thinking, right? Like, but I would suggest to you that one of the main reasons why he is so amazed is because I think he's seeing the same woman in Revelation 12. Again, it's merely the remnant which has remained faithful. But the woman and her many daughters or offspring that she's had, they've all been turned. Unfortunately. And John is just there saying, how could this have happened? I mean, can you imagine John at the time in which he's writing this? Where is he? Patmos. Why is he there? On exile. He's being persecuted for his faith. Now he's seeing a woman who's supposed to be a religious power, who's claiming to do the right thing, and she's persecuting and killing faithful believers. Can you imagine if the position was reversed and John was the jailer and the jailers were in Patmos? Do you think he would persecute them in the same way? This is what's like, wait a second, when we're being persecuted, we're faithful. When we move out of that persecution, all we do is persecute others? Didn't we learn something? All right, let's see how far we can. Verse 7. And the angel said to me, why did you marvel? I will tell you a mystery of the woman and the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast which you saw and is not will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to perdition. So indicating this beast will eventually have an end, right? It's not going to be there forever. There's more I want to say here. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, those whose names are not written in the book of life, which is there from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was and is not and yet is. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. Okay? Now, many have used this in the past as saying Rome, right? The city of 7 hills. But I think that there's more than merely that here. Mountains are often referred to like Mount Zion. Have you ever heard of that? It is the center of the universes where God rules from. God rules from Mount Zion. God sees everything from Mount Zion. The notion is that mountains also represent political kingdoms. Much like a beast represents a political kingdom. So the 7 mountains do correspond to the 7 heads. Following along? To some degree. So I'm not denying that it could mean the 7 hills of Rome, but I think that there's something even more that is there. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. There's another indicator. First, she sits on what does it say here? On the many waters. Then he turns and he looks and she's sitting on a beast. Now in the explanation, she's sitting on 7 mountains. Same thing. All right, let's keep going here. There were also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short time. The beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th. Now notice, there are usually 3 to 4 different ways that various commentators of various denominations have sought to explain these 7 heads, these 7 mountains, if you will, the 7 kings, which are all corresponding to one another. We know that because 7, 7, 7, 7. It's coming to the fore here. Now, the key to what I believe the best explanation is, or at least I should phrase it this way, the best explanation I have heard so far, right? I want to be open to following what the word actually says, and if a better explanation comes, I'm more than willing to follow it. But the notion is that there's a beast that was and a beast that is, right? Or a head that is, or a kingdom that is now. Now, when John is writing this, what kingdom is he under? Rome. So notice this, it says there are 7 heads, and he says 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. So out of the 7 heads, you have 5 that have fallen. The 6th one would be the one that is. What would we call that? Rome, right? Pagan Rome. The one that is to come is going to come after pagan Rome falls. We might say papal Rome, right? This religious power that goes after. By the way, it seems to fit because what are we told about papal Rome? This beast as well that is referenced in Daniel 7 as well as the little horn. What does this horn receive? What does this beast receive? The dreadful beast. It is both political and religious, right? Which is why it's part of a beast, because it has that political sway and that political power. One of the receives the mortal wound, right? But then is. So notice the way, like, think of the mortal wound and then hear the way in which it's described. It says here, 5 have fallen, 1 is, that's Rome, the other has not yet come, and when he comes, he must continue a short time. The beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th. So there's 1 head that's going to be there, but then it's going to be is not. But then it's going to be there again because it's going to be like an 8th head, but really it's the 7th head coming up again. Do you see there the mortal wound like it's dead, but then it's resurrected again, the deadly wound, exactly. But just for a short time, right? At least, thankfully, just for a short time, because the first time was long, 1260, right? So the second time, it's just for a short time. Now, the question is then, what are the other beasts? And there have been various explanations, but I think the best one goes with any political power that has really been over the people of God. Starting, some have gone as far back as Egypt. That might be the first head. Now, I'm not saying this is the interpretation, but I'm saying this is the best interpretation I have found or discovered so far. Egypt, then I think it was Assyria that came and took at least the northern tribes away. Didn't quite take all of God's people away, but took the majority of them away. Then you have Babylon, you have Medo-Persia, and you have Greece. All 5 of these kingdoms ruled over Israel or the territory of Israel to some degree during their spans when they were kingdoms in the earth. 5 which have fallen because Rome is the 6th. And there's 1 that's coming, but that 1 will be, then will not be, and then there'll be an 8th, but that's really the one that was. Kind of like a little bit confusing. Many things in Revelation are confusing, right? But this is the best explanation that I've heard for the 7. To me, it makes sense because here's one central point. It's 1 beast, but it's got 7 different manifestations. Who was behind the kingdom of Egypt? And who was behind the kingdom of Assyria? And we can go down the list. It's really Satan which is granting power to geopolitical and often religious systems. Don't think Egypt wasn't religious. Egypt was very religious. The Pharaoh was one of their gods, right? They worshipped the sun. They bowed to cats. Some people still bow to cats. That's all right. Not in the same way though, right? You're not worshiping them. I don't want to offend any cat lovers here. But you notice what I'm saying? Like many of these, even Nebuchadnezzar, wasn't Nebuchadnezzar like, I need to be worshipped. I need to be worshipped so bad. I need an image this tall made of solid gold. So it's not saying like each time there is political and religious together, but who's the one moving behind the scenes constantly? It's the one Satan. And he comes through different, sometimes he works through Egypt, sometimes he works through the kingdom of Babylon or Medo-Persia or Greece or Rome at this time, but there is one that's coming after as well. It's the same thing, just looks different. Kind of like you could take a car that is like broken down, burnt out, maybe take the engine and you put that same engine in a different car. It looks all brand new, but the engine has been burnt and isn't good, right? And after that gets demolished, we'll take that same engine and put it in another car. Like, you can repackage it, make it look as nice as you want. You can make a recipe that tastes really bad. Doesn't matter how much cream you put on top. Like whipped cream, it's not going to make it taste good, right? If it's burnt, it's burnt. Now you got cream with something that tastes burnt. But that's what Satan is trying to do. Do you see that? He's trying in one system, it fails. Well, let me try another way. But it's the same thing. His system does not work. It's only through faithfulness to God that God's system works. That's why we must be humble. That's why we must surrender to Him. All right, thankfully this beast does have an end though. We read here again in verse 11, the beast that was and is not is himself also the eighth, and is of the seven, he is going to perdition. There is going to be an end. There's going to be destruction. The 10 horns which you saw were 10 kings who have authority or who have received no kingdom as yet, because it's still future. Rome hasn't been separated yet, but they receive authority as 1 hour as kings with the beast. Again, I don't have an absolute explanation for this. I'm not sure. These are of one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast. I mean, these kings which come, eventually they submit. The empires submit to that little horn which comes up, which uproots the other 3. They all submit for 1,260 years until General Berthier comes and takes the Pope off his throne. There is the notion that they held so much power and sway. It was crazy. And yet part of the amazement is that they're going to hold that much power one day again, even if it is for a short time. Right. These will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them. Can you imagine making war? I love the imagery here. It's so wonderful. Make war against the Lamb. How many of you would gladly do battle with a lamb? You know, but that's the way it's described often in the Bible. Like when Jesus is coming for the second coming and he comes, he's like, many are fleeing and saying, mountains cover us. You know, like we want to flee from the wrath of the Lamb. How often have you seen someone run for your life? There's a lamb coming behind going, bah. Like, it's odd, isn't it? But to those who believed, who have surrendered their lives, who have gone through persecutions and been through trials, when Jesus returns, he is the lamb who wants to just cuddle with us, right? He's coming to take his people. But to others, the lamb is the lion. Run for your life. But really, he's a lamb. He's tenderhearted. He's soft. He doesn't want to bring destruction on everyone. It's merely they've chosen that for themselves. So they make war with the lamb, and the lamb wins. I mean, the lamb wins. Praise the Lord, right? But the imagery there, you have to wonder, like, get like a good boxer out there with a lamb, and the lamb wins. Like, how could that happen? Exactly. Righteousness does prevail. The Lamb will overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And those who are with him are called chosen and faithful. Then he said to me, going back to the first question, what do the waters represent, which you saw where the harlot sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. The fact that there are 7 kingdoms, and these kingdoms were huge in population in comparison to the faithful people of God. This is constantly the connotation which is brought up. In other words, let me rephrase that or paraphrase that for something today. The majority are wrong. Maybe not always. After the flood, Noah and his family were right. Probably the few times where the majority was right. But yes, I agree with you. For the most part, like almost every time, the majority is typically wrong. And you have that being told here, that those kings who are giving power to the beast, they have the popular vote, if you will. They have the popular acclaim. The people of God, the chosen, the faithful, they are in the minority. Maybe that's why we're also called as part of being with the Lamb, because the Lamb is one of the most defenseless creatures that can exist, and yet the Lamb prevails. The 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot. Hang on a second. The 10 horns which you saw on the beast will hate the harlot, make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. Whew. That doesn't sound like fun for the harlot, does it? For God has put it in their hearts to fulfill his purpose, to be of one mind, and to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman whom you saw is that great city, again, a political as well as religious power that reigns over the kings of the earth. You have here a picture that this woman, can't believe we made it to the end, that's amazing, that this woman is portrayed as someone whose rule will come to an end, and everyone who lavished gifts on her and everyone who fell for her deceptions, eventually they figure out she was lying. And the way in which they turn upon her doesn't look like a pretty picture, does it? The popular vote is really nice while you're popular. And when you're not, it's not fun to be popularly hated. Like, you know, when most people hate you, that's not fun. And that's exactly what's being described here. They're lavishing her. The kings are committing fornication with her. As long as everything's going well, everyone's making some money or doing whatever, it sounds good. But when they find out that she's lying, that she has ulterior motives, they will hate the harlot. They make her desolate, naked. They eat her flesh, burn her with fire. I mean, again, not a pretty picture. And yet it says that this is part of God's purpose, right? That he gives all those lies, puts them all into light so that everyone knows about it, and then he leaves this woman to her fate, which she has been heaping upon herself time and time and time again. Yes?
Was it partially fulfilled in 1798 with the prophecy?
I certainly see some of that there, for sure. But I think that the notion of desolate and naked, eating her flesh and burning her with fire, it seems to, I don't know of anyone, like a mortal wound or a deadly wound is not the same as burning something with fire. Like when you burn something with fire, it's gone. It's not like, oh, I burnt you with fire, but you made it. Like unless you have an extinguisher right there, you know, sometimes in the movies they put people on fire and then they hose you down like literally a couple of seconds later, and because you're wearing all this suit, you don't actually burn. But the way in which the Bible is describing here, it's the notion of like eating the flesh, devouring by fire, like this woman comes to nothing. It's not a mortal wound, it's just they're killed, right? But I certainly see some element of there where these 10 kings eventually have enough. And they give the mortal wound, right? But little by little, and this is part of what the amazing or mysterious part is, this head pops up again as an 8th head, but really it's the 7th. The mortal wound was healed, and everyone is amazed. Like, how is that possible? The kings have forgotten what the woman was actually like until they realize she hasn't changed. She's still that harlot. She still lies. She still tells us pleasing things just because she wants our money or something else, right? And when they figure out what that motive actually is, and when they realize they've been duped, is that the word? Like you've been tricked? The turnaround is not very good. Which again leads us to one of the central messages in the entire book of Revelation, which is trust in Jesus. Be faithful to Jesus. Spend time every day with Jesus. There's no safety out there in the world. There's no system that will save you except the system that is found in these pages, which God offers free of charge to anyone who just wants the time. And if you don't have one of these, almost everyone has one of these. Right? That notion is just a beautiful notion that Jesus cares enough. You know, Jesus didn't have to give us the book of Revelation at all. Why did he do so? Because he cares. Because Jesus doesn't do things in secret. Jesus does things openly. Sometimes a little bit more confusing than perhaps we would wish him to do it, but nevertheless still open and telling us. Remember, the key part to prophecy as well is in John, I think it's in chapter 14, I'm forgetting what verse it is, maybe verse 29 or something like that, where Jesus says, I tell you before it comes to pass. Why? When it happens, you will believe. You will believe. He's not telling you beforehand so that you can plan how to manage the stock market. He's not telling you beforehand so that you can just say, hey, guess what I know? He's not declaring it as though he needs a kind of like confidence boost or pride boost, like, look, I have knowledge you don't have. The reason he's telling us is because when you see that I tell you this and this, it's after prophecy is fulfilled and you look back and you say, wow, he was right. That should lead you to have the same response that Peter had. You'll deny me 3 times. No, that will never happen. I'm ready to die for you. What happened? Denied him 3 times. But what was his response? My Lord knew. And what did he remember when he remembered that? I have prayed for you. I have prayed for you. Jesus is praying for me, knowing I'm going to do this. Lord, please forgive me. The turn to God is always something which happens after. So don't be too pedantic on this is what it means and this is exactly what happens. If it happens differently, it might happen differently than we expect in some areas, but it will happen faithfully according to the text. And if we can believe God happening the first time he was right, the second time he was right, the third time he was right, the fourth time he was right, we haven't gotten to the end of the book of Revelation, but you know what's coming. He's coming in glory, and we get to go home and spend eternity. There'll be a new heaven and a new earth. That is worth trusting and waiting and leaning and praying and developing that relationship with Jesus. That's why he gave it to us. That's the central message.
And he also gave us to understand Daniel, because if revelation hadn't come, we wouldn't fully understand Daniel.
I agree.
And he said, close the book until such and such.
Yes. It was written for our time. I really believe it. I really believe we don't have that much longer left. I've gone a few minutes over time. Let's bow our heads and pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your blessings to us each and every day, far more than we can count and way more than we deserve. Father, I pray, help us to have our eyes fixed on you in everything we see in the world. The temptation is that we just feel like we're thrown into despair. But you are still in control. You still rule from Mount Zion. You are aware of what's happening. You are allowing it to go so far and no further. You know when the end must come, and we trust you, even when it's difficult for us because we do not see the end from the beginning, but we trust that you do. I pray, Lord, help us to lean on you more. Help us to develop our relationship with you more. Help us to be the kinds of people you would have us to be at this time in Earth's history. May we truly be light. May we be part of that remnant which frustrates the enemy's plans. May we, when we see you coming, say, behold our Savior, behold the Lamb of God. This time not coming as a sacrifice, but as a redeemer, as an overcomer. What's the point, Lord, if we gain this whole world and lose our souls? I pray, Lord, for ourselves. I pray for me. I pray for my family. I'm sure we all pray for our families. Nothing is worth losing out on heaven and eternity with you. Help us to spend that time daily with you little by little, not because you ask it of us, but because we desperately need it for ourselves. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Have a wonderful evening.